Back on TYT Sports, David Stern is still blaming everybody besides David Stern for vetoing the trade that would have sent Chris Paul to the Los Angeles Lakers. It seems like every time there's a podcast opportunity to interview the ex-NBA commissioner, who you could ask many questions to, did you fix the Kings versus Lakers game that sent the Lakers to like the free throw line 77 times in the fourth quarter?
Does that annoy you that you're the second most popular Stern?
Howard is the first one, probably.
Who's next?
Bear Stern, the bank.
What about, there's a Stern on a boat, no?
You can be the stern or the bow.
Yeah, so even they're probably more popular.
Probably the fourth most popular Stern.
Yeah,
it must also crush him that like every commentator says, and when it comes to Adam Silver's commissioning, I think he does a bang-up great job, which nobody really said during David's.
No one ever says that about any commissioner. Like he's the one that actually gets a pretty decent crack.
He gets a good rep, and I'm going to rip into the MLB's commissioner when we get into the baseball clip and Rob Manfred. But first of all, it's extremely difficult to be a commissioner. It's like being president of the United States. Half the country hates you no matter what. Yeah, and not maybe this president of the United States, but in general.
And you have like the biggest shoes to fill. We all know that Commissioner Gordon is the best commissioner.
Gosh, you're from Batman.
You're immediately fighting a losing battle.
He's got Gotham's a rough city.
Even like every Commissioner Gordon, whether it's animated or whether it's in person, has been pretty good.
So he's blaming everybody except himself for this veto trade. And we've been over how this has happened, and a lot of people who follow the NBA know at one point, right before a trade deadline, Chris Paul was going to be traded from the New Orleans Pelicans, whatever they were at that time. I think they were the Hornets.
They were the Hornet Pelicans.
They were the Hornets, and then they became the Charlotte Hornets, and they became the Charlotte Bobcats, and New Orleans Pelicans. Not important. Regardless, they vetoed the trade, and David Stern, because the NBA owned the Hornets at this time. So David Stern was the acting owner, which is like the biggest conflict of interest. The NBA commissioner is the acting owner or part of a group of active owners of a team. And like he still falls back on this reason too. It just didn't seem like the right deal for the Hornets. Like it would have really hurt them, even though in return they were getting good pieces. And if there's ever been a landscape changing what if, I think Chris Paul to the Lakers would have been that landscape changing what if, because it was the only what if where we could say it was going to happen. Like we could always say, what if LeBron James went to the Lakers instead of the Heat in 2010? But that was never really a thing. He went to the Heat. It's always, and once he made that decision, you saw how it lined up. What if Kevin Durant stayed on the Oklahoma City Thunder? What if the Thunder stayed together? These are all things that, given how much we've seen over the past few years, would not have happened. Chris Paul was supposed to happen, and because he wanted it to happen too. Chris Paul and Kobe Bryant, and I think Lamar Odom was on that team, but he might have been a piece of that trade. Pau Gasol was eventually there. We're talking about another big three that would have made those Lakers-Celtics games in the finals possibly insurmountable for the Celtics. Also could have given a really strong chance that when the Heat finally got together, if those teams stayed together, the Kobe versus LeBron finals that we never got. And for example, Kobe and LeBron have played in the finals, not together, but separately for the last decade.
We're doing a clip, Jason. I want it to happen where we will do a clip on all the things that have happened since LeBron James last wasn't in an NBA Finals.
Or if you even go back with Kobe too, it would be 2006, so I was a freshman in high school. You were probably playing football professionally.
I thought you were just going to tee yourself up for an obvious old joke. You were probably like 28.
No, see, I'm not this bit. It's like you just got back from your trip to Uganda.
Why did you just change the pronunciation for no reason other than Uruguay?
Uruguay, United States. You just got back from a long trip.
So I'm just laying off me.
Time in Uganda is different. It's like when you're on a different planet.
What I want to discuss with Chris Paul is like, yeah, the what if of what could have happened still comes second in my mind at the moment, because whenever I see Chris Paul's name in the headlines, I'm just thinking,
he just never went to the Clippers?
What is going to happen now?
Oh, now.
Like, what is going on with him now? Because the more we think about it, we were sitting the other day at our table doing absolutely nothing like we like to do, and you just looked over and went, Chris Paul could work at the Spurs.
I just like that there was. This is the report. I love the reports, right? This is the same reports you see in world football. Bayern's mutually interested in Lionel Messi. No shit.
Everyone's.
I gotta be. It's like when people say it's like Chris Paul. It's like the Spurs and Chris Paul have a mutual interest in each other. It's like, you know, me and my mom have a mutual interest in alcohol, but that doesn't mean I'm going to be flying back home right now to start drinking.
That's where the connection came.
My point being here is, of course, Chris Paul's a free agent, and just like Kevin Durant, and just like LeBron James when he was a free agent, we're talking about a player who is game-changing enough to immediately make a team that is either good be great, or take a team that is actually pretty mediocre and make them into playoff, well, not just playoff contenders, but if you went to the Eastern Conference, for example, whatever team you went to in the Eastern Conference would be immediately better. The Spurs, I actually don't think it would work, but Chris Paul would have to change a lot of his game, which I think he would be interested in doing. And the reason I say that is Chris Paul dribbles the ball more so than most point guards. He is a pass-first point guard, but he holds the ball. He stops the ball a lot of the time. And the Spurs offense that works so well is, well, you catch and you pass, you catch and you pass and you give it up. But to see Chris Paul facilitate that type of offense would be a basketball orgasm. It just would be. It would be a orgasm. I have no other way to put it.
Yeah.
Because you've watched Chris Paul play, and there's a very bad take that Chris Paul is an overrated point guard because of the success he's had with the Clippers.
He's a pass-first point guard.
Not true.
He relies on other players to be able to step up when given them that opportunity. That's like saying, I don't know, you put Andres Iniesta on Stockport. Every basketball fan at the moment has no idea what I'm talking about.
Where's Stockport? Is that near Glasgow, or is that near London? Is it?
It's somewhere in England.
Mary, can we see a nice map of Stockport?
You put Iniesta in Stockport and he sets up the Stockport striker 9 times out of 10 and the guy doesn't score, doesn't make Iniesta a bad player. It just means he's providing those opportunities, and I'm not saying that the Clippers are of Stockport standard. They've got talented players who can help, but at what point does Chris Paul think to himself,
I want to win.
When am I going to? Like, how much longer have I got? What age is Chris Paul at the moment? 30.
About the same age as LeBron. He's 32, isn't he?
Yeah, that's what I imagine. As far as the Spurs go, my first thought on that would be: is it such a bad thing if they brought in a new point guard that did not necessarily fit directly into the system? Because let's put it out in perspective: that system, which had worked for years, has had them fall short to the Golden State Warriors 2 straight years. What will happen if they bring in someone that maybe alters it a little bit? I'm not saying that they're going to slow things down, because in the Western Conference, you slow down, you're going to get eaten alive by the Golden State Warriors because they're such a high tempo team. The only way to kind of add to it is to maybe adjust so that Chris Paul scores a little bit more as well, because I think that in this day and age, point guards need to be putting up numbers as well. He has the ability to do that when the Clippers give him that chance. I still would love to see him either on the Spurs or in New Orleans, because I think the idea of a Cousins, Anthony Davis, Chris Paul offense is another borgasm.
It's a borgasm. I think
orgasms around.
These are by the board. The board might be in the word, but it is obviously a compliment. So you have to change some of his game, but we're talking about not just in general a high IQ basketball player. We're talking about a high IQ person.
Yes.
By Chris Paul is with LeBron James, the head of the NBA Players Association. And is a great ambassador for the game in the way that he leads by example off the court too. And that is not as important, but in terms of what Greg Popovich's culture is, I don't think of all things Chris Paul would have a problem fitting into that culture that has been created. And when it comes down to it, he can't, if Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan are your best available players, unfortunately, what we've seen is that DeAndre Jordan's direct benefit from having a point guard like Chris Paul has elevated his game so much that, yes, I am completely sold that any other point guard, save for maybe 2 or 3 in the league, there would be a significant drop off in DeAndre Jordan's just overall impact. And then if you put him on the Spurs and Kawhi Leonard, and not just Kawhi Leonard, what Jonathan Simmons has shown that he could do, Dwayne Dedmon, I think is actually going to leave the Spurs. He's going to be a free agent. But Danny Green, players who are able to create shots, not to mention Kawhi effing Leonard, LaMarcus Aldridge, players who can create their own shots is what Chris Paul does not have on that team. I think, it might have been Chris Broussard. I don't know to be sure though. Chris Paul plays on a team where only Jamal Crawford and himself are the only two who can create their own shot. And that's a major problem. So the Clippers experiment, great for the Clippers. They became relevant in basketball for the first time in their actual franchise history. And now it's time to blow them up and start over. Because Chris Paul should be leaving if he wants a shot at a title. Blake Griffin should be going to Oklahoma City if he wants a shot to compete. DeAndre Jordan, unfortunately, is locked under contract, and he might be the new face of the Clippers. JJ Redick's going to probably sign a multi-million-dollar contract. So, Chris, this clip is on David Stern. And I just realized that we're still talking about Chris Paul. But yeah, Chris Paul to the Spurs. I like the clip more. I can't believe that. I like that we tangented that much because I was having way more fun discussing this than David Stern because David Stern is old news.
Well, that's the thing. Sometimes it happens. I don't think anyone.
Who's your
at
favorite
this point,
David?
My favorite David.
David of and Goliath?
I think it is. I was going to go with a David and Goliath outlook. I like David
Schwimmer?
You know what?
David Duchovny?
You know what I recently watched David Schwimmer in? And I don't know why it's taking me this long. Band of Brothers. Oh, and I was thinking to myself, why is Ross trying to act so hard? Like he's always Ross.
I don't know, people say I look like Ross. Because I'm Jewish. Effing Jews.
I mean, I didn't. No, I'm trying to think. Favorite David. David
Hasselhoff.
How are you just spouting off Davids? How do you have this many Davids on cue? I'm struggling for a David.
David Blaine. David Carr.
David Bowie, Jesus Christ.
David Bowie.
David Bowie.
David, who did the Sistine Chapel? Michelangelo.
David De Gea.
David De Gea.
Except it's David De Gea.
David.
Another one of those guys that I'm sure Dan would not like because he changes his name just for the sake of it, even though.
Any other Davids?
No, it's different.
Nobody? Asher, you got a
David
David?
Kohler.
David Kohler.
Asher from the back just gave me a little signal and went, as in to say, the guy who signs your checks, always Dave Kohler.
The GOAT Dave.